Good evening, everyone. I also just want to echo all of the thank yous that Angelique put forward, particularly to you, Roy, and to your wife who let us hang out in her house with you. My name is Christina Livingston. I'm the executive director of the California-based community organization, ACE. I'm also the chair of CPDA, and ACE has been a member of CPD since 2017. And part of why we're a member of CPD is because we know that within the CPD network are some of the most amazing power building organizations across the country. We know that we are up against some really big fights and that we can't take on those fights alone. And when I am with folks that are in the CPD network, that are working on CPD staff, I know that I am with like-minded folks who see the world the way that I see it, who believe in a progressive political agenda that I believe in, that I'm fighting for the folks who are members of ACE. And I actually know that when we're able to fight together, when we're able to, become more than the sum of our parts, then we can pull people into the streets and move the kind of political agenda that actually only moves when you do the kind of work that we're doing in this network. So that's why I'm excited to be here today, because we've got a really important election ahead of us. Obviously, there are some big risks that we're taking if we don't actually win in these elections coming up. So I'm really excited to have some of the executive directors of the affiliates who are in battleground states, who are not only going to help us win and protect our democracy in this year, but also in the years to come, in the 5 years and the 10 years to come, as we're really trying to win the structural changes that we are seeking for people in this country who really deserve to be seen and to be respected and to have dignified lives. My notes here. I think I really want to thank Maria for being here because SEIU has already decided that they would invest in CPD and partner with us because they understand what we can bring to the table, just the critical gap that we fill in the work that we do. So thank you, Maria, for being here. I guess you can see me here, but I can see you there. Thank you. So let me go ahead and just do the quick introductions of who's here in front of you, because I haven't done that yet. And then we'll have a little bit of a discussion that includes you all and save some room for questions. So first I want to introduce you to Leo Murrieta. He is the director of Make the Road in Nevada. Next to him is Steve Paul, who is the co-director, right, of One Pennsylvania. We've got Ana Lilia Mejia, who's the co-director of CPD, and Demario Cooper, who's also the co-director of CPD Action, the political conversation, and Maria Peralta, who's the national political director at SEIU. Okay, so actually, Maria, I wanted to start with a question for you. I was just talking about what's at stake here, but I'm wondering if you can share your thoughts on really how we should be looking at the moment that we're in, how we should make sense of this moment.
Thank you so much, Christina. Can you hear me?
We can, yeah.
I'm so sorry I couldn't be there in person. Ana Lilia, forgive me, and Demario, but I also feel honored to join you, even though it's virtual. I understand that I can't see folks in the room, but I think people have an envelope on their chair or with them. So we wanted to ask everybody to open up that envelope right now, if you could, and take out what's in there. So what you should be looking at right now is an illustration of what we're up against. 60% of American voters will have an election denier on the ballot in November. We're talking about people who are running extremist right-wing candidates who are running for governor, secretaries of state, attorneys general, election clerks, anybody who has a hand in designing the election systems in a state, in certifying In counting votes and certifying elections, those folks are running. And, it's just a stark reminder of the way in which Republicans view their mission, right? Which is to seize power through any means necessary. And how do they gain the levers of power? By gaining control of the systems of our voting and democracy in this country. Right now, there are a lot of conversations about what this upcoming election is going to be about. We're in all of them: the economy, abortion rights, crime and safety, Biden's numbers. And I really think it's important for us not to fall into the trap of thinking that these things are in competition with each other, but rather to think about how we can tie these issues together with a message that shows voters that we understand what they're going through and provides a vision for a future that inspires them to turn out to vote. This moment is also a reminder about what this moment is really about. I talked about, the right wing trying to seize power through any means necessary. The same folks that are denying workers the freedom to organize in a union are the same people wanting to deny women the freedom to an abortion and freedom to make choices about our bodies. They're the same people who are attempting to deny our freedom to vote, right? And it's no accident that our freedoms, that the attack on our freedoms followed the violent insurrection to overthrow our democracy on January 6th. But this is not new news, right? And I know Ana Lilia and Damario are going to talk about the history of what we're facing right now, right? This is an old playbook that we're talking about. After the insurrection, they understood that the only way that they could implement their vision for our nation, which is completely corrupt, which is really to modernize their voter suppression tools, right? They're going to take the old playbook and modernize it for today. So whatever you think about what the defining issue is going to be for November, democracy is unquestionably on the ballot. Unquestionably on the ballot. And the question is, for us and our challenge is, what are we going to do about it? We need a forceful response. We need a response that lifts up the importance of our voting rights, that lifts up voting rights champions while ensuring that there are electoral consequences for election deniers. That's why we've partnered with CPDA and other partners on this work. We can't sit this one out. We can't hold our resources for 2024. Because if we lose these midterms with all those election deniers that are on the ballot, even if we win in 2024, we lose. We will lose because who will be in charge of those elections? So democracy is on the ballot. It's going to be on the ballot in 2024 and beyond, and we've got to get in motion now.
Thank you, Maria.
Thank you.
Damario, do you want to fill in a little bit of the picture here that Maria was alluding to?
Yeah, so Maria's talking about, when we talk about the historical context, one of the things that Ana Lilia and I are very clear about is part of the thing we're dealing with in our communities is not apathy. It's not really apathy. I was in a focus group some years ago, and it was a bunch of Black men in a focus group, and they were talking about, initially they were saying, well, no one votes because the voting doesn't matter. It doesn't matter. It's not going to change anything. That's why, I don't participate. And then one guy stops and says, actually, I don't know who to vote for. And then he said, I need somebody like you. And it was a young African-American man who was facilitating this focus group. It's like, I need somebody like you to come and show me, somebody I trust, to come and tell me who I'm supposed to vote for, because I'm really scared of going to vote and then coming out and realizing that I voted for the wrong person, right? He's like, I got 3 jobs. I got 3 kids. I got 2 jobs, and I don't have time to do the research, right? Which then led me to this place myself of going, like, we actually need to help people contextualize themselves in the historical moment. But what is the historical moment that we're talking about? If you know history, and I don't expect everybody to know history, especially folks who are at home listening to this, we know that there was something called the Reconstruction Amendments that happened after enslavement ended, Civil War was fought. these 3 amendments got created: the 13th Amendment, the 14th Amendment, and the 15th Amendment. The 13th Amendment said you can no longer, as a person, own another person in this country. The 14th Amendment said that you have the right to privacy, you have the right to due diligence of the government, you have protection because you were born in America. And then the 15th Amendment gave Black men the right to suffrage, the right to vote. And what happens after that is that a bunch of Black men actually do vote. And when they vote, they took over 2,000 elected positions in the South. This is in like the 1870s, right? And you have Black men who are elected to office from the local level to the state level. They're in state assemblies. They're even in Congress, right? And what happened after that, the next 7 years, there was something called the Compromise of 1876. And the Compromise of 1876 was during a contested election for president. And Rutherford B. Hayes, who was the Republicans at that time, they cut a deal and said, we'll let you be the president, but then we're going to take the Union troops out of the South, because up until then, the Union troops were protecting the rights of Black newly free people. And when that happened, we seen the insurgents in the rise, like literally the Ku Klux Klan was created as a reaction to this. Once the unions were no longer protecting the ballot box, the Ku Klux Klan came in and then put Black people in their place. And it took another 100 years into the civil rights movement before Black people actually had the right to vote again. Where are we at today? Barack Obama became the president. We all loved that. We all saw that. Then someone challenged his status as a citizen based on where he was born, 14th Amendment. That movement creates the Tea Party. Tea Party pushes in Donald Trump. Donald Trump unleashes this like racist sentiment that's in America. So what we're saying, as far as the moment that we're in, the actual moment that we're in another part of this thing. And over the since the civil rights movement, there was a concerted effort by people like Charles Koch and a person named Jim Buchanan, who was, these people founded the Heritage Foundation. They created things like ALEC. There was a strategy that they ran, and like wealthy people tried and failed, like different types of strategies to figure out how could we get the world that we're currently in. What we're saying is, like, right now we're aware of this. Like, these patterns are not old. As Maria was saying, like, we've seen this playbook before. And what we're saying at CPD and our affiliates, we're like, we actually need to like interrupt and disrupt this particular moment. And this election with these democracy deniers, it's not about just denying democracy, right? Like, it is about weakening our ability to participate in democracy so that they can run rampant over humans, basically, the climate and human beings. And so we're really, we're making this argument that we know that our people are the difference. Like, the electorate that is missing are the people that's our base. And we are, as organizations, and I'm gonna let Steve speak a little bit more about folks in the base, but that is the work that we're up to. That's what we're really up to right now. How do we activate people, help them understand the moment, and move them into action?
Thanks, Mario. So we talked about national perspective, we talked about history, but people only experience really what's happening in their cities and in their states, and that's why the local affiliates are so important to make that connection. So Steve, can you just talk to us about how you see it from a state perspective and how your members see it?
Yeah, sure. So, I mean, before I even get into like just the state perspective, I want to just pick it back off what Dee said, right? Like, like coming here, I was thinking about just like how crazy it is that I'm in this moment, given that like my parents, my father, right, like came here, emigrated from Haiti in 1982 to basically escape a dictatorship and escape political violence, right? I myself like came to this country in 1996 after there was a successful coup attempt by the military in Haiti. And just to be here, to just be talking about what, quite frankly, which is an attempted coup that was unsuccessful, because thank God, and I say this a lot, thank God when the insurrection happened in January, some things actually held strong, and those folks, the Republicans, the right-wing agenda did not succeed that day, right? Like, they did not overturn an election and Biden actually got certified. But we know like their long-term strategy is to make sure that they weaken those institutions that worked in January 6th. So in 2023, 2024 and beyond, they actually have the access and the power to do what they couldn't do that day. And so, not only do we have a bunch of folks across the country running for Secretary of States, city commissioners, governors who completely denied the 2020 election, but they have come to the conclusion, instead of giving people like me and my members a seat at the table, they would rather destroy all of the democratic institutions that we have held dear in this country for generations. And that is where we are. So you have folks, election deniers, anti-democratic candidates running in Michigan, Pennsylvania, Wisconsin, all over the country. And in Pennsylvania, just to give you some perspective, right? Like, it's not just that Doug Mastriano, if he wins, he's going to force everyone to re-register to vote. He's going to make sure like one PA can't get involved in elections, right? Take away all of the wins we got through Act 77 in 2019. But he's also basically, he gets, unlike other sort of like across the country, what's dangerous about Doug Mastriano is we don't elect our Secretary of State. The governor also appoints the Secretary of State. So he would essentially be the most powerful governor in the country in a presidential year. And so for us, him getting elected would completely change the landscape of our ability to do the work that we do, right? Like, I mean, it was hard enough to like actually get folks, like be on the ground educating folks about how to vote by mail, right? Our folks didn't trust that process. They're used to going to their lines, and like there's a whole ritual around that. We did a ton of work to like bring our communities to a point where they trusted a vote by mail process. And now we have folks who are completely trying to dismantle that and confuse us on the ground. And so that's pretty much the danger of having someone like Doug Mastriano win in 2020. But I will also say, I'll just end on this. It's like, even if hopefully we win, right? Doug Mastriano doesn't become governor, the General Assembly has sent, the only thing we've had that's been protecting us is a governor's veto. Since 2019, the General Assembly has been trying to overturn all of the wins we got through Act 77, passing crazy laws and crazy bills. And Governor Wolf has been the only one in place to veto them. But now we're in a position where instead of going through the governor, they're just putting legislation on the ballot. And so now we're fighting on two fronts, right? So even if we won the governor's mansion, we still long-term have to think about like, what does our long-term fight looks like on the ground for the next decade? And so we also don't want to be fighting the governor.
Thank you. So just quickly, we've heard democracy is on the ballot. We've heard that, there's a long time battle that we are in to protect hard-fought rights, to protect hard-fought wins that are bread and butter wins for people, and that really trusted messengers on the ground are being pushed out of the game. This is sort of the context of what we're seeing this election coming up. I'm wondering for you all in the audience, is this also what you're seeing? Do you see it differently? Is there something else you want to put into the conversation that we should be thinking about as we're, taking on these fights? Did we get it right? I mean, can I get an amen? Okay, let the church sing. All right. So let's just assume then that we're all on the same page about what we're up against. The question then becomes, really, how does CPD and the affiliates actually propose to face this moment? So Ana Lilia, if you can start, and then we'll have y'all follow up here.
So our perspective is that deep organizing, connecting with people, being in community 365 days a year is critical and important. The reality is that our communities need to not only gain that understanding of who the candidates are, what's at stake, what are the different levers, and feel empowered to participate, to take their rightful place in self-governance. What we are up against, has been said or stated, is that it's a battle between, will we have minority rule or will we have a participatory democracy? For us, we deeply believe that this beautiful participatory democracy requires our base, our people feeling empowered and connected to government. There are many that are talking to white working class. There are many who are talking to suburban soccer moms. For us, we're like, we need to talk to the people at the center of the pain. Black people, brown people, immigrants, the working poor, people who have been felt pushed out. And so for us, that means Our strategy for this upcoming cycle, and frankly, looking at the next 10 years, is what I will boil down to 3 Ds and a map. So first, we are calling the question on these democracy deniers. CPD is very good at this bird dogging, right? Showing up at places, calling the question, empowering people to ask those tough questions and be strategic where they show up. In fact, I believe y'all are having an action on Mastriano tomorrow to do exactly that. The second thing is that we believe that we need to have some deep popular education, right? A Freirean model of helping individuals not only understand what's happening, but be equipped to teach others in their community. It's what John and I talk about. What is it? Turfed. What is it? Trained and turfed. Thank you. Trained and turfed. People who feel empowered, understand how to have one-on-ones, understand how to cut an issue, and have a turf to talk to folks in their community. Finally, we believe in what is popular political education. We were showing some of these videos that we intend to create and translate, drop into communities so that folks understand, frankly, in the way that they receive information, social media, interesting ways. I mean, heck, we're talking about putting QR codes on stickers on buses or showing up in places where people naturally organize themselves, like Afropunk that just happened a couple weeks ago. And we need to show up where our people are at. Finally, this map. We understand that the lines have been drawn for a decade. So we are working hard to understand, to create a heat map, to be able to see where the opportunities are for us to get the biggest chunk of our people engaged and informed, right? Limited resources require that type of strategic targeting of our communities. And we understand that it's a long game. We're not going to fight a 70-year plan overnight.
Thank you, Ana Lilia. Leo, how are you all in Nevada facing this moment?
So our organization, so this Saturday is the 5th memorial of the Route 91 mass shooting, Harvest Festival shooting. It touched our city. Folks know the headlines. You probably know the headlines. 58 people lost their lives, over 500 people were rushed to the hospital. But the story that didn't make the news was that working that night, the event was a group of 120 undocumented support staff. And when those folks went the following morning, along with everyone else, to go and receive assistance, these folks were turned away. And they were turned away by law enforcement because either the color of their skin, or they didn't speak English, or they couldn't prove, they didn't have their schedules with them. As undocumented folks work under the table, supervisors don't give written schedules. So Make the Road came in because these folks were turned away and sent to a mental health center to prove that they were in fact present at the shooting in order to receive assistance. But the assistance never came, as essentially law enforcement just said, go away. And when they were told to go away, Make the Road got called in, and that was my first day on the job. I had just come from New York from an interview, and the shooting had happened while I was in New York, and I came back. And at 6 a.m., that was my first day on the job, working with this group of survivors to become whole again. And we Make the Road, instead of coming in and telling them like, this is what you need, this is what you got to do, this is how your life's going to get better. We ask them questions like, how can we improve your quality of life? Like, what's the journey that needs to happen? And because we didn't come in from top down, we build trust, right? Like, it wasn't very much like, I have the solutions, I'm the director, therefore I know all the things, you should just do what I say. But because we didn't do that, we actually built trust. We worked with folks. We knew their families. We worked within their employers. Like, we knew all of them. We built this trust, and we led a campaign against the sheriff, who today is running for governor. And this sheriff turned hopefully not governor, was the individual who stomped on their U visa cases for several months, refused to reach out to these people, survivors of a mass shooting. You couldn't throw a rock in Vegas without touching a survivor and a politician who wanted to talk to that survivor and shake their hand. But this politician said no. And so this guy the reason why we won against this powerful sheriff was because these folks learned to work through their trauma. They trusted us, first of all. They trusted us to work through their trauma, to actually learn about what needs to happen. And they launched a campaign to pressure this guy to sign their U visas, that's the stupid process. And we won. This was a conservative sheriff who didn't see value in undocumented people, in immigrants, people who don't speak English. He saw no value in our lives. And so we organized the people that he detested, and then we won. So now we're back 5 years later, and this guy's running for governor. And more so, 5 years later, this guy is saying, right, like, oh, I'm proud to deport all these immigrants. I don't know if the 2020 election was sure. I don't know about women's rights. I don't know about marriage protection. I don't know about all these things. But one thing that we do know about, his name is Joe Lombardo. We know Sheriff Lombardo doesn't support our rights, right? Like to say it, Lord Voldemort, right? You got to say it. You got to say, oh, they got a lot. Sorry, he came into the room. But you know, we build power. We built power 5 years ago, and we stood it up, and we were able to win against this guy. And so now 4 or 5 years later, we're trying to make sure he doesn't try to grasp for more power, because the moment he had it, he rejected anybody who needed it. And so beyond just holding and stripping our rights as people, preventing us from access to the ballot, he doesn't see dignity in our lives. And so as an organization, we are working and fighting to make sure that he knows that it doesn't matter if you don't care about us. We care very much about the process, and we're going to make sure you're unelected and you don't have a job anymore.
Thank you. All right, we're running sort of short on time, but you know, we're talking about elections here, and there's a million people that are out there doing election things. One important question, particularly for this audience, is what differentiates CPD and the network from the other folks that are doing that work? So Steve, if you want to kick us off there.
Yeah, yeah, sure. So, I mean, I think a couple of things, right? Like, first, I will say, like, we are in the communities year round. I think CPD, all of the affiliates, we are best positioned to kind of like turn folks out during election cycles, because we don't just have that conversation twice a year. Like, I can't tell you how many times my canvasser will go knock on somebody's door. It's like, what do y'all want? I'm voting or whatever. And we're like, no, sir, we're just actually here. There's been some issues in your community. We want to talk, have a conversation with, right? People expect that when you come to them a certain time of year, that you're just here to talk to them. You're just here for their vote, right? And so for us, like, you know, the reason we're very effective at like turning folks out is because we don't show up just during October or April and May, right? I'll give you an example. 2020 was obviously a hell of a year. I mean, we started that year knocking on 160,000 doors, making sure that our folks, well, first we did a bunch of focus groups in the communities that we do work in to kind of understand why people didn't fill out the census, right? Because we understood that the same people who are undercounted are the same people who are less likely to be registered to vote, same people who are less likely to like show up to the polls, right? So we did the work to like understand why people didn't complete the census. And through that focus group, we were able to come up with effective messaging at the door to actually have a conversation why the census was important, right? Political power and resources. And then, right, like after talking to those folks in our universe, we went back to them like, yo, remember the conversation we had about the census, political power? Well, it's time for redistricting. How do you feel about your community being gerrymandered? And it could look different, like you can get more resources if your community wasn't gerrymandered. And so we had a conversation with people about what those political maps could look like. And so we work with our partners, Make the Road and CASA, and like created these beautiful community maps. And at the State Voices table, at the C3 table, we like presented those maps to our legislators. We lobbied together, and it was a really powerful moment for our communities. And then we went back to those same folks, right? Like the next time, like, hey, okay, you got those maps, time to hold these elected officials accountable, make sure you're registered to vote, and started to have a conversation about, you know, why it was important to come out and vote. But we don't just like show up during election times. And at the same time in 2020, we won eviction foreclosures during the pandemic. We both at the municipal level in Philly and statewide through the a governor's executive order. We also like organized with supermarket employees and all across the state to like actually get PPE to make sure like folks were actually safe in their workplace, right? So we were doing all of those things at the same time. So when we come, by the time we come to you say, yo, vote for this person, we've been there in the trenches with you. And so you trust us. And I think, you know, I will also finally say that like the thing that also makes us better positioned, like it's not just that trusted relationship, but like I can call Megan from Make the Road. I can hit up CASA, like right, our action tomorrow. It's CASA 1PA Make the Road, making sure Doug Mastriano doesn't feel welcome in Philly. But he decided, you know, he could come to Philly. It's like a huge Dominican and Puerto Rican town, part of Philly, that he could come while nobody's watching. And so we're gonna be there to welcome him with open arms, I'm sure. So I think it's just that relationship that we build with communities and our ability as a network to actually, there's already an institution and places to actually have those deep relationships be easier, right? Like I folks spend a lot of time trying to build coalitions and relationships, but you know, being part of a network, you already kind of have that sisterhood and brotherhood existed.
I'm just going to take a facilitator's privilege for a minute to say the other really amazing thing about CPD and our deep connections with the community is our ability to move from defensive fights to going on offense. And I just want to lift up that at ACE, we have people who came from our membership base, who then came on staff, who are now elected officials and who are helping us put forward a progressive agenda. I'm talking about people like Melvin Willis, who's a city council person in Richmond, and Carol Fife, who was our director in Oakland and is now on the city council. And they have both put forward really important renter protections on the ballot. And if you all want to talk with me more about that local stuff, I'm happy to talk about it. But for time purposes, Maria, thank you so much for hanging out with us. I know it's late on the East Coast. Here you are, sorry. Yes, absolutely.
Offer a donor's perspective on this, which is many groups have gotten the message about needing a multiracial coalition, a multi-class coalition, and very few have been involved over that long term, that ongoing relationship. We moved to Wisconsin, I mentioned to a couple of folks during the 2020 cycle to vote from there, and we just saw how futile that transactional get out the vote is, because it's like there's nothing there. It's like it's just something. But what's really rare is I can't think of, and the reason I want to say this before Maria left is I can't think of a single other time that we've had a group invite labor in for this kind of conversation and do it side by side. And I know these are long-term relationships and these are day-to-day pocketbook issues, and not everybody can pull off that kind of economic justice alongside the day-to-day deep organizing that all you're doing. So I just want to pass my compliments before Maria left.
Thank you for lifting that up. That's really important. And sort of along the vein of from a donor perspective, not that labor is necessarily a donor, but not that it's not. Maria has invested in CPD, and I'm wondering, Maria, if you could just speak to like the opportunities to, you know, make a real difference through the support of the folks who are here in the room and also the folks with you at SEIU.
Sure, absolutely. I want to appreciate the previous comment. I mean, I think, well, first we have to, electoralizing the fight around voting rights is it's a key part of defeating the threat of fascism in this country. I wish I could tell you that there are a lot of tables out there like the one that we created with CPDA. Unfortunately, there are no others. Like the work that we're doing together right now is really unique, and there's a real gap in the space. So it's up to us to pave the way. And to the comment about having labor in the room, I mean, we have to start breaking down the silos that we've been operating in. We have to do this together. Our SEIU's international board last year named voting rights as a priority for our union at the beginning of the cycle, because they recognize that our struggles are connected. So the fight for democracy is not just an issue for voting rights groups, and the fight for organizing in the workplace is not just an issue for unions, right? These things are so interconnected. Ultimately we need resources to wage this fight. Yes, we are donors, or we are also partners in the trenches. I want to, appreciate Steve and Leo, like we're working with you in those states. It's a multifaceted fight. we've got to continue to provide the vision for democracy. I also just very much appreciate that the approach that CPD takes is one of year-round organizing. It's not about boom and bust and going in September and then wondering why our communities look at us and say, what is this about, right? And so, as a table, we also agree that there also has to be a level of militancy and disruption in this moment in order to achieve, our current vision for freedom right now. We have to create an environment where it becomes obvious to our communities why voting is necessary. That means the robust community organizing and engagement that CPD drives. We're with you in the trenches, the deep organizing, and then the actions like Ana Lilia referenced, like holding Republicans accountable, the bird dogging that, is happening now in states across the country, and the deep conversation canvases that are happening with voters. I think that the last thing I wanted to lift up is how we talk about this issue. There was kind of an assumption, it's been a recent conversation in democracy spaces that, well, voters really don't get, voting is not a thing. Like, it's not something that's going to get people like interested or motivated to turn out. And in fact, we've been doing some interesting research with his strategies this past year to really scrutinize the assumption that voters in communities of color wouldn't get interested or motivated around a conversation that involves voting rights and taking a racial justice approach to that issue. And we found that there is a very powerful way to mobilize key parts of our so-called base. I feel uncomfortable using that word because there's a lot of our communities are taken for granted when we're treated as a quote unquote base. But we found that there is a powerful way to mobilize key parts of our communities talking about voting rights through an explicit racial justice lens. And it's something that CPD and other partners are now using in their messaging. And we want to continue to build on that, right? Leave no stone unturned. So, these are just a few ways: break down the silos, collectively work year round to drive deep organizing, deep conversations and relationships in the communities, and be prepared, continue to resource the work, because we got to be prepared for what we know we're going to be facing in 2024 and beyond. That's why we support CPD. That's why our table exists. And, I just want to applaud Ana Lilia and Demario and the leadership for the work that you all are doing. And, we're in this together.
I'm looking down from up in the sky. I don't quite get go. I've been without you for all this time. Good God, I'm bent up.
Racism in the United States is older than the country itself. And it's the main play used by white supremacists to keep other folks down. Immigrants, black folks, tribal nations, all people who don't fit their version of America. And it's not changed in over 400 years. Violence, lying, and even insurrection. The end goal is always the same: control. Control over our voices, control over our bodies, control over our identities. Right-wing extremists are the strongest they've been since Nazi Germany in America, and history is repeating itself. A lot of them are on the ballot this November. They cheat because they know their ideas are so bad that if they told the truth, nobody would vote for them. And at CPD, we know the other thing that they know. We know that there's more of us than them. We know that we, the people who believe in justice, the people who build community, the people who take action and make things that seem impossible possible, we are the people who make a more perfect union. But how do we do it? We do it by working together. And this series is going to show you how we ended up in this situation. It's going to help you understand who we're up against and what we need to do together now. They win when you don't participate, and we win when you do participate. So join us. Let's build our future together. The insurrection wasn't about election security. It wasn't about fighting to protect democracy for everyday Americans. It was about white nationalist fear and paranoia. January 6, 2021 was another example of white supremacists trying to control our government. Motivated by the fear that white power is losing its grip on society, white supremacists have capitalized on that anxiety, pushing the Great Replacement Theory. The Great Replacement Theory is a belief that people of color will replace white people and take over the country. White supremacists believe that the only way to stop it is by murdering people of color.
Breaking news out of El Paso with the site of a deadly so many in shock that a prayer group could be violated in this way.
We begin this morning with the latest on yesterday afternoon's deadly shootings at a supermarket in Buffalo, New York.
Since then, the Great Replacement Theory has been recently linked to several hate crimes across the country. The theory motivates white people to kill. But that ain't new. Since the violent suppression of Black Americans' vote after the Reconstruction era, Tulsa Race Massacre and the destruction of Black Wall Street, countless lynchings and mass murders committed during the Jim Crow era, and the deep impact of the Southern strategy, Reaganomics, and the racist war on drugs after the Civil Rights Movement. Instead of uniting our divided nation, Trump Republicans have pushed white fear into violent extremism. That's how we got to this moment. In 2020, we voted in record numbers. We marched and protested to make sure that our votes and our voices were counted, that no one could take that power away, our power. Today, Trump-backed extremists are running for the highest offices. We have to stand up and use our power now. We must stop the agents of white supremacy and fight for a better society. Join us. Our future is in our hands.